This is a Dutch testing report tutorial to assist with interpretation. Please do note that these videos are for educational information only and not for medical advice. The results that we're showing are just an example. They're not from any particular patient, and certainly not the patient that may be of interest to you. So please do note that as we discuss this. The first bit of information, with all the information we have on cortisol that we want to look at, is that free cortisol pattern. So we're looking at free cortisol throughout the day, at waking, in the early morning when you typically see the highest levels of cortisol, and then the afternoon, and then usually our lowest levels are seen at bedtime. So we're looking at those four numbers and we're adding those up to get a total for free cortisol. And in this particular case, we're looking to make sure it's not totally suppressed because the patient at least appears to be on some sort of glucocorticoid, and you're still getting reasonable levels of free cortisol. So prednisone, those sorts of things would be glucocorticoids, and if you get enough of it, it can shut down your cortisol production. Now, free cortisol tells you what's circulating. However, metabolized cortisol is really your best marker for overall production of cortisol. Okay, so as we look at cortisol, it's made by the adrenal gland because the brain tells the adrenal gland by way of ACTH, a signaling hormone, to make cortisol. So it makes cortisol. As it circulates, it also goes back and forth between its active form cortisol and its inactive form cortisone. Because it spends so much time in its active form, we also want to look at the pattern of free cortisol to see if it sort of agrees and tells that same story, because that's a helpful bit of information. The back and forth by cortisol and cortisone is mediated by an enzyme called 11-beta-HSD. Then it's all metabolized, and this is irreversible. Now it's not cortisol or cortisone, it's a metabolite of those, and it's ready for excretion. The total of those metabolites, which we call metabolized cortisol, is your marker for total cortisol production. Now in this case, that also is not low. It's either normal or elevated. So you have pretty good confirmation here that if the patient's taking a glucocorticoid, it's not suppressing, at least not entirely, the cortisol production, and that's a good thing to see. And then you can evaluate with a little bit more detail, what's the diurnal pattern looking like, and that sort of thing. The other bit of information we can see from the data is which is predominating, cortisol metabolites or cortisone metabolites, and that is a helpful piece to the picture sometimes, as it helps to clear up kind of what's going on and how do we want to really characterize this patient's cortisol overall. And to do that, we want to look at free cortisol over time, the total of production, and then any metabolic preference that there might be, and again, taking that all into context of any potential supplementation with a glucocorticoid that might be affecting that. So I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions, especially from a patient perspective, please do see your healthcare provider for those, and we thank you for testing with us.